Welcome everyone. It's class time, your daily classroom for CSEC and Cave Studies. Watch us in real time on TVJ Jamaica's YouTube channel or One Spot Media. We are also live on gojamaica.com. And if you have questions on today's subject, send them to Television Jamaica's Facebook page at Television Jamaica or Instagram at television_Jamaica or use the hashtag TVJ. TVJ class time. Today's subjects are English Literature and Mathematics for CSEC and Cape Economics. We'll begin with English Literature. I'm Alethea Brown, your teacher for today. Let's begin. Today, our focus is on the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, and we will be looking at ways by which we go about analyzing the themes in a novel. So as we go through, please pay attention to thematic analysis. Here we go. Now, you might be wondering why it is that I'm projecting a screenshot of the Black Panther. Well, for two reasons. One, the Black Panther, when it was released, became one of my favorite movies of all time. And two, we're going to be looking at some ways by which the movie makers corresponded or portrayed some of the themes of the movie to us. So, the Black Panther, I had some scenes from this movie that I absolutely enjoyed. For example, I recall the scene where Sherry said to King T'Challa, "The better question is, what are those?" I found that very interesting. I also recall Njadaka saying, "Hey, auntie." Yeah, that one really got me. So it became one of my favorite movies. It had some real hilarious scenes in it. But apart from that, though, the movie The Black Panther communicated more deeper underlying issues. And that's some of the things that we're going to be focusing on for the next few seconds. When you reflect on the movie The Black Panther, can you identify any real-life issues that the movie makers may have been trying to communicate to us? Think about it. So we have the movie The Black Panther. What were some real-life issues that the movie makers communicated to us through this movie? Very good. Patriotism. Can you think of any other? Of course, we could look at the whole issue of family relationship. Can you identify any other real-life issue? Exactly. Women empowerment. One more. Attitude to power. Excellent. And these are some of the real-life issues that came out in that movie. So we have identified some of the topics that the movie was about. But what was it that the playwrights or the movie makers tried to communicate to us about each of these topics? Let us take the issue of patriotism, for example. So we're going to remove these, and we're going to be focusing on patriotism. What was it that the writers tried to communicate to us about patriotism? And before we even answer that, can anybody give me a working definition of patriotism? When we talk about patriotism, what are we talking about? Very good. Love for one's country. How is patriotism shown in the movie? Right, we could look at King T'Challa. Remember, he went to great lengths to protect the legacy of the Black Panther. He went to great lengths to protect the throne. Excellent. Is patriotism shown in any way? Think of the character Okoye. Yes, she also went to great lengths to protect the throne. In fact, I recall once when Nakia was making her exit and she said to Okoye, "Won't you come with us?" She said no. she said, my duty is to protect anyone who is sitting on that throne. And so she stayed to defend the throne, all because of the love she had for her country. So what exactly is it that the movie makers were trying to portray to us about the whole idea of patriotism? Think about it. Yes, sometimes in being patriotic to one's country, it demands a lot. Sometimes it even takes us being required to give our lives. Because Okoye was adamant that whatever it took, she was going to defend the throne. And this is how we go about looking at themes. And that takes us to our objectives for today. So in today's lesson, we want to be discussing the guidelines that we can use for analyzing themes in a literary work. We also want to assess the treatment of one thematic concern as it is depicted in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. I also hope that by the end of the lesson, you would have developed the ability to respond to literature for pleasure and insight and to make sensitive appraisals of value judgments. Come with me. Now, you would have heard about themes maybe from you were in grade 7, and the concept has not changed. So, based on your knowledge of themes, I want you to write for me one sentence that gives a definition of themes as they relate to literature. What are themes? I'll give you a minute to write that. Let's see what you came up with. When we talk about a literary theme, we are talking about the main idea, or we are talking about the message that the writer is communicating about a particular issue. And normally, these issues are real-life experiences. So when a writer sits to compose a story or to put a novel together, he or she thinks about some aspect of reality that he or she wants to communicate through the work. And then the story is developed around that idea or those ideas. Because depending on the nature of the work or the length of the work, you can have more than one issues or real-life concerns being developed. When we talk about themes, we are talking about a central idea or a message being communicated around a particular real-life issue, as I said before. And these real-life issues form a part of our experiences as well. When we talk about vicarious living, right, sometimes we do not experience these issues ourselves, but by reading a text, we can become au fait with what the writers are projecting to us through the storylines. And then we have to be mindful that when it comes on to thematic discussions, writers may choose to address certain topics in different ways. What do I mean by that? Two writers can write on the issue of love, for example, but they can treat the issue in different ways. For example, one writer might look at love as this blissful union that just puts people in a bubble and raises expectations and so on. Another writer can look at love as something that is devastating, that breaks the heart, that causes much dismay to those who choose to engage in it. So the same issue, different treatment, which is why we have to be very careful in how we analyze themes and how we interpret a writer's portrayal of a thematic concern. When we sit to assess or analyze a theme, we also have to be mindful that themes are not explicitly stated in a particular work. What do I mean by that? A writer is not going to say, okay, my book is about death. Please sit and enjoy the story as I develop the theme of death. No. You have to read extensively, you have to read the work as a whole, and then you pay attention to how the writer treats the theme of death, as is the example being used in this case. And remember that different writers may take different approaches, so that's why it is very important for you to read to get an understanding of where the writer is going with a particular theme. So as I said before, it takes an overall understanding of how the writer treats the issue, and this understanding comes from your reading of the entire text. So let me just pause here to ask how many of you have completed reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Because if you have not completed your reading, chances are you will not be able to write a fulsome essay on a thematic concern. So if you haven't yet done so, please go read the book so that when you get to analyzing themes, you can do so and provide your supporting evidence. So what I want you to do now is to think back about a particular novel that you have read, a particular storyline. It could be a short story, it could be a novel, it could be one of the fabulous Wattpad books that you all are engaged in. Can you think of any real-life issues that came out in those stories? Of course, each of them developed some aspect of life that we can relate to, whether directly or indirectly. For example, some stories are about love. Have you ever read a novel that spoke about love? What did it say about love? How was love portrayed through the storyline? There are some stories that focus on friendship. That could be another real-life issue that is communicated through the storyline. Or it could be a story about bravery. And if you think back on some of the CSEC poems that you're doing, I'm thinking Dulce et decorum est, for example. That's a typical example of a poem in this case that spoke about bravery. But I'm sure there are other works you may have read that speak to any one of these themes or others, thematic concerns. So let us recap what we just said. 1, writers approach the issues from different angles. So 2 writers might be writing about the same issue, but they look at them from different angles. This is why it is important to read the work, read the entire work, to see what angle the writer is looking at the issue from. Writers develop different real-life subjects or topics in their works of art, and such topics can be love, death, friendship, courage, you name it. These are some of the real-life topics that come out in some of the works that we read. And then remember that a theme is the message that the writer tries to communicate. So a theme is not just a word. A theme has to be related or relayed in a sentence or maybe a few sentences. So the word is the subject matter that the writer chooses to develop. The theme is the treatment of this subject matter. What is the underlying message that the writer is trying to communicate to us? What value lessons can we take from the issue as it is presented in the work? So I want you to think of the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. I want you to think of some of the issues that Harper Lee tried to communicate to us. Look at the characters' relationships with each other. Look at how the characters relate to their setting. Are there any underlying messages that Harper Lee is trying to communicate to us? Of course. And we are going to be taking a closer look at those. Remember also that theme analysis is subjective. This means that we all have different interpretations of a particular issue. So I could read a novel and I see that love is one of the issues developed in it. Fine, you would see that too. The way we interpret it, though, might be different, and that is okay, because different readers take different messages from the stories, and that is fine. At the baseline, though, we have to ensure that whatever it is we are saying can be substantiated from the text, or by evidence from the text. So when it comes on to theme analysis, it's not just to say, okay, the writer projects love through the story. Yes, the writer might be projecting love, but what is the writer saying about it? And once you have presented your argument on the writer's treatment of love, what is the supporting evidence from the story now to, kind of supply the details for what it is that you are discussing? And in order for you to fully analyze the writer's treatment of a particular issue, you have to consider the work as a whole. You can't read just a section and say, this is it. Consider the work as a whole. Okay, it's time for a quick break, but don't go too far, because there is much more when we return.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with the cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much.
It's here. Interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel on onespotmedia.com. With a combination of live Zoom classes and recorded class time, Schools Not Out lessons, and numerous educational content, we've created a comprehensive 24-hour channel dedicated exclusively to educating our nation's youth. Early childhood through to primary, secondary and tertiary, it's one stop on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in association with Television Jamaica Limited.
COVID-19 tip. Protect yourself and others from getting sick by washing your hands after coughing or sneezing, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare food, before eating, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, and after handling animals or animal waste.
Welcome back. Let's pick up where we left off. Before the break, we were looking at how it is that we go about analyzing themes in a novel. We looked at the fact that themes are central ideas that the writer communicates to us. We looked at the fact that a theme is not just a word like love or friendship or bravery. A theme, rather, is the entire message that the writer communicates to us about any one of these literary topics. We were looking at the fact that when it comes down to theme analysis, it can be a subjective affair because different persons take different ideas from a story, even if it is about the same topic. At the end of the day, though, what is important is that there is enough evidence to support our claims about whatever thematic concern it is that we are discussing. So we were at the point now where we are talking about writers changing their angles and why it is important for us to read the entire story. Sometimes a writer can start off by showing us a particular angle to a particular issue. But by the time the story ends, that angle changes, and this could be a narrative technique, which is why you have to read the entire story. I cannot emphasize it enough in order to see exactly where it is that the writer is going with his or her treatment of the issue. So, having said all of that, I want you to write 3 points that we can consider when we are analyzing themes. Let's jot these down on the board here. What would you say is the first step? Very good. Read the text. You must read the text. Step number 2. What was that? Yes, look for any real-life issues that the writer is communicating. And these issues have to be conveyed throughout the story. That is another important point. So because two characters are at odds with each other in one particular scene doesn't necessarily mean that there's a theme of violence. If this is perpetuated over the course of the story, then you could say that this is one of the aspects that the writer develops. So that is why, again, coming back to the point, you have to read the text. So point number 2, pinpoint the real-life issues that are coming out in the story. And after you've done that now, you're going to make an analysis, an informed analysis of what it is that the writer is communicating to the audience or to the reader about these issues. And that is how we go about analyzing themes. So you see, it's not so difficult. Providing you read the story and providing you're able to supply your responses with evidence from the text, then you're on your way to making a fulsome analysis of thematic concerns in the novel. All right, so just to reinforce what we just said and to take the discussion a little bit further. So having read, having pinpointed the real-life issues, having looked at the writer's message, some people may say, "But miss, I still don't know how to pinpoint the thieves. I still don't know what to do." Well, these are some pointers that can help you. 1, pay attention to the manner in which characters react to each other. Sometimes we can get whatever issue it is that the writer is presenting through the reaction or the interaction of characters with each other. So is it a case where characters are kind to each other? It could be that the writer is developing an issue around kindness or developing the thematic concern of kindness. Is it a case where characters are always at odds with each other? And is this something that is carried throughout the entire novel? Then it could be that the writer is looking at aggression. It could be that the writer is looking at something that is contrary to harmonious living. All right, so that's one way. Pay attention to the way characters respond to each other. Another aspect you could look at is the way characters respond to their setting. And I tell you a story. I read once of a true story where some miners were trapped in the earth because whatever they were mining down there, the cavity of the earth collapsed on them and they were trapped down there. I think it was about 14 of them, but they decided that they weren't going to allow their circumstances to defy their outcome. So they held on together, they held it close. I think the story said they survived on just a few slices of bread and probably a glass of milk for so many days. But they were determined to get out of it. And even when it seemed as if the rescue mission wasn't going to come to fruition, they still held on to hope. That reaction of character to setting is teaching us 2 things. 1, the characters were hopeful. And 2, this was a game of survival. So 2 issues come out of that one scene. So pay attention to the reaction of characters to their setting. You can also look at how the characters manage conflict. Do they run away? Do they stand up? Are they brave enough to defend their cause? How do they manage conflict? This is another way that can indicate the setting of the story, or not the setting of the story, the thematic concerns that are developed in the story rather. So what I hope you're seeing here is that there's a connection between all the elements of the story. Character and setting, character and conflict. So it's not as if the elements of the story are, separated and each operates in its own domain. There is an interrelatedness. And if you can pinpoint the connections, then that is one more step to assessing the themes that are brought out in the story. So we're going to zoom in a little bit more now on a particular issue that is communicated through the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. And guess what? It's drama time. As you listen to this dramatic presentation, I want you to bear in mind that we're looking for the real-life issue, the topic or the idea that Harper Lee is making a statement about. Also, see if you can identify the particular experience from the novel that this drama piece is based on. All right, here we go. The bell rings. Enter Miss Caroline in a very dismal school setting. "Come on in, boys and girls, come on in, hurry inside now, it's time for class to begin." One by one, the students file into the classroom with much nonchalance. My name is Miss Caroline Fisher. I'm from North Alabama, from Winston County. Good morning, Miss Caroline Fisher, the students echo in a chorus. I will begin by reading you a story about cats. The teacher reads the story, unaware that the students lack any semblance of imagination. All they know is feeding hogs and chopping cotton. With much self-assuring exuberance, oh my, wasn't that nice? And now the alphabet. She scribbles the letters of the alphabet on the board. Does anyone know what these are? Yes, Miss Caroline Fisher. Jean Louise Finch, come up and read these for the class. Jean calls all the letters on the board with much disinterest. This was way below her capability. After all, Atticus had her reading stock market quotations from the mobile register. You just stop right on there, Jean Louise Finch, and tell your father to teach you, not to teach you to read anymore. He is interfering with your reading. Teach me, Miss Caroline? He hasn't taught me a thing. He just sits in the living room and reads because he's very tired when he gets home. You just tell your father to stop whatever he's doing. You need to learn to read with a fresh mind. Now I'll have to undo all this damage. Scout goes back to her seat, bewildered. No. Can you imagine how Scout must have felt? This is a little girl who is reading way above her grade level. And now she's being told that she's to stop reading and that she's to unlearn what she has already learned and that she is to go back to learning the alphabet because she has to read with a fresh mind. Wow. Now, Harper Lee is communicating a real-life issue to us. Can you pinpoint it? In fact, she dedicates 3 chapters to this particular scene. Do you recall this scene? Yes, it was Scout's first day at school, and what a grand entrance. What a grand beginning. All right? What real-life issue do you think Harper Lee is making a statement about here? Did you say education? Very good. Let's look at the issue of education. And you have to bear in mind that this is the formal education system we are talking about, because Scout was already educated in so many ways before she went to school. So we are now looking at the formal education system as one of the thematic concerns in To Kill a Mockingbird. So let's just get this on there. In the meantime, I want you to think of possible messages that Harper Lee is communicating about the formal education system. What is Harper Lee saying about the education system? Is it something uplifting? Is it something that challenges students to be their best? What is she saying about it? All right, so we have education, and we're going to put that in bold right here, formal education. In order to fully assess this particular issue, we have to look at what it is that the education system entails. All right, so first of all, we see a very dismal school setting. The students who come to school lack motivation, so there's a lack of motivation. And I would say on the part of both students and teacher. Are the students challenged intellectually? I don't think so. In fact, Harper Lee made a case of saying that many of them had failed the alphabet and were repeating that class because they failed the alphabet. Now tell me, how does somebody fail the alphabet? All right, so we realize that there's no intellectual stimulation. And generally speaking, and this is one of the terms we have heard in Jamaica, at least I've heard it in the past, that the education system is a failing system. And that is how Harper Lee presents the formal education system in Macomb. So we have identified formal education as one of the issues that is communicated through the story. Remember, the next step now is to look at what is the message that Harper Lee is communicating through this issue. What is she saying about the education system? Think of the points we have. It is a dismal school setting. The students are not stimulated to learn. We also realize that the teacher herself lacks motivation. In fact, when Miss Caroline came, we realized that she didn't have total control of the content that she was teaching. All right, she started to read a story about cats, not knowing the ability of the students, not knowing that these students don't even want to be in school. Remember the UL boy, for example. What did the narrator communicate to us about Bob Ewell's son? She said that he only came to school once for the school year to ensure that his name was on the register, and he didn't come back at all. So this formal education system is not presented as an entity that holds much promise. There's not much to it at all. So then, I want you to go ahead now and write 2 sentences on the topic of the education system as presented in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. And remember, 1, you might have a subjective view of education that is fine. Ensure, though, that you're able to provide enough evidence to support your claims about the education system. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Write 2 sentences about the education system as demonstrated in To Kill a Mockingbird, and ensure that you have enough evidence to support whatever claim it is you're making. All right, go right ahead. I have gone ahead and I've written my 2 sentences. So we are seeing where the writer showcases the education system as being inauspicious in terms of the quality of education that the students are afforded. Additionally, so that's my first point. Remember I said write 2 sentences, so that's my first point. Additionally, it is a system that deprives some students of the ability to learn at a faster pace, while at the same time it is failing others who do not exhibit any semblance of academic growth. Can you see these points being communicated? Am I on the right track here? Will I have enough evidence to support my claims? This is how I try to support my claims. So I'm giving an example of how the education system is not being anything too beneficial to the students. So I'm looking at Scout's effort to read, and they are stunted by the teacher who thinks that she is reading too much and needs to go back to learning the alphabet. And this in itself is a retrograde move. Remember, Scout wasn't even taught to read formally. She sat on Atticus's lap when he came home in the afternoons, and that when he took out the paper to read, I guess that's how her eyes picked up a few words. And before you know it, at age 6, she was reading very fluently. So when Dill came and he was introducing himself, do you remember how he introduced himself? He said, "My name is Dill and I can read." And I'm sure Scout was like, "Okay, you can read, so what? So can I." And Dill was a little older than Scout, so Scout didn't find that to be a grand fanfare because she already knew how to read. Yet, when she went to school, the teacher was telling her basically to learn how to unread. I don't know how that is going to be accomplished, but that's what Miss Caroline Fisher said. We also see where the writer tells us that most of the children in the class, as I had said before, had failed the alphabet test the year before. So the education system is not presented as the kind of affair that holds a lot of promise for the students, nor for the teacher, because Miss Caroline Fisher herself seems to be unmotivated. And because of that now, the children are falling into the ambit of failure. I mean, at the end of the day, what are they going to leave school with? So that is my view of the education system. What is your view? Have you written your 2 sentences? Have you found supporting evidence from the text for your 2 sentences? Very good. So you can share those, and remember always to ensure that you're looking at the issue in a fulsome manner. All right? How does it fit into the storyline? And on that note, how is it that Harper Lee is situating the whole idea of education into the make-home context? We have to look at the fact that make-home is an ailing, quote-unquote, community or county. It is a situation where, because of the economic hardships, there is not much to do. Because there is a fall in the economy, there's not much money to pay teachers. And maybe that is why Miss Caroline is not even motivated to teach the way she should be teaching, if she knows how to teach at all. If there's no money to pay the teachers are not going to be motivated. If the teacher is not motivated, unless it's some intrinsic motivation or something from the inward part that says, I owe humanity a debt, then the teacher might not, be the best in the classroom. And if that happens, we realize that the case of the students being in the class, not learning much, failing the alphabet is the ultimate outcome. So we see how things are connected here. So we just connected the issue of education to what was happening in terms of the economic status that was transpiring in Macomb. So when you look at literature, students, you have to examine all the elements together. As I said before, themes are not unrelated from characters. They are not disassociated from setting. Everything comes together to form a whole. And if you approach it that way, then you won't have many issues. So what we have looked at today are guidelines for analyzing themes in a literary work. We said in order to analyze themes, we have to pay attention to the work as a whole. You cannot isolate a segment and say, all right, I've seen this issue and this is a theme that is developed in the story. No, you have to look at whether or not that issue is perpetuated over the entire discourse. So that's one way. When you are assessing themes, you also have to look at how it is that the writer treats the issue, because some writers treat the same issue in different ways. We looked at the issue of death. Some people might see it as a liberating force. Others might see it as something that just totally breaks families apart to the extent that they cannot recover. So you have to look at how the writer is treating with the particular issue. We also looked at the fact that a theme is not just a word. The word is the subject around which the theme is developed. The theme now is going to be what it is that the writer is communicating about that subject. So when a teacher asks you what is the theme in the story, you have to look at what issue is being communicated and then analyze what it is that the writer is communicating about that issue. In order to analyze themes, we said we have to look at the unity of the work. So we look at characters' interactions with characters. We look at the interaction between character and setting. We look at the way characters manage conflicts in the story. And all of these can be indicative factors of the themes or the thematic concerns that are developed in the work. We looked at the treatment of the education system, the formal education system in Macomb. We said that the formal education system is a reflection of what was happening in the real society. The real society is an impoverished one, and so is the formal education system. All right, so we looked at that in the context of what was happening in Macomb. We realized that the teacher is unmotivated, and because of that, the students are not learning as much. It seems to me that she is also demotivating the students. All right, we looked at the fact that Scout is being told to unlearn everything that she has already learned, and that is going to be a difficult, if not impossible, affair. So when Scout went home that day, she tried to make a deal with Atticus, and she said she didn't want to go back to school. Atticus said, all right, let us compromise. He asked her if he knew what a compromise was, and she said, yes, it's basically when you come to an agreement on something. So Atticus said, you go back to school, basically pretend that you don't know how to read, and then when you come home, you can read all you want. And that is how he got to appease Scout so that she felt, motivated to go back to school the next day. And if it is that the education system is a reflection of what was happening in the society, then we see why the education system was so dismal, because Macomb itself was a dismal affair. So by now, you should be motivated to develop the ability to respond to literature for pleasure and insight. You're to enjoy what you're doing, students. Read with understanding, read to get some amount of enjoyment, but also read to make informed decisions about whatever issue it is. It could be themes, it could be a character analysis, it could be the writer's techniques. So read to enjoy, but also read to be able to make informed discussions. And then I hope that going forward, whatever judgments you make about whatever aspect of the novel, they will be substantiated with evidence from the text. But I couldn't go without giving you your follow-up activity. So for your follow-up activity, I want you to zero in on the theme of the legal system, another salient issue that is developed in the story. Look at the theme of the legal system and discuss Harperley's treatment of it as it is depicted in the Macomb society. What do I mean by the legal system? It is a system of the laws that govern Macomb. All right. And if you're going to be looking at this theme, just to give you some pointers to set you on your way, then you can look at one, the fact that the county was operating under the Jim Crow law system. Research that and you can infuse that into your discussion. Look at the Tom Robinson case. How did the legal system fare out there? Did it fare out at all? Emphasis on the word fair here. All right. We see that Tom, even though there was no evidence to support the alleged crime of rape, he was found guilty. What case is Harper Lee making about the legal system there? Look at Atticus in his position as lawyer. Is he able to effect the kind of changes that Maycomb needs? Because at the end of the day, Atticus wanted Maycomb, it was his desire to see Maycomb come under the umbrella where they realize that, look, people are people, people have rights, and that everyone deserves a fair chance, especially when it comes on to the legal matters. So give some thought to the legal system and make sure that when you're developing your answers, you do so with supporting evidence from the text. I hope you're as excited as I am, and I do look forward to seeing some of those responses. Again, discuss Harper Lee's treatment of the legal system as it is portrayed in the novel. Well, that's it for today's lesson. Be sure to do some reading on your own. Until the next time. And remember, you can send your questions to Television Jamaica's Facebook page or Instagram at television_Jamaica or use the hashtag TVJClassTime. Stay tuned for CSEC Mathematics after the break.
Here, interactive classes for all ages on the School Time channel on onespotmedia.com. With a combination of live Zoom classes and recorded class time, Schools Not Out lessons, and numerous educational content, we've created a comprehensive 24-hour channel dedicated exclusively to educating our nation's youth. Early childhood through to primary, secondary and tertiary, it's one stop on one spot for education 24 hours. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in association with Television Jamaica Limited.